Hey everyone, I'm Andrew Coates, your host of the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. Welcome to episode 312 Lifetime. I know that's a lot, that's over 6 years. And I enjoy talking to fitness professionals from Australia. This one's always fun. It's hard to make scheduling work with you guys because I'm recording it Wednesday at 5. And for Sharelle Grant, it's 9 a.m. Thursday morning, which just sounds fucked to me. So but I like Australians because I've always found that you guys seem to be culturally ahead of the curve with fitness. I swear, at least my perception, I'm Canadian, and we like to think Canadians are pretty good. Statistically, there's a little hit or miss. I think I come from the province originally in Newfoundland, where we have the highest rates of obesity traditionally in the country. But I always think of Australians as, a more active community that seem to care a lot about fitness, and you guys seem to be ahead of us, is the way I look at it.
Mm.
So it's great to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. And I sort of agree. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to toot our own horn or anything, but I feel like there's some great coaches in Australia, and we do have quite a tight-knit, smaller fitness community as well. Like, most people know each other. So it's sort of like you can't get away with being an idiot, I feel like, in Australia if you want to go well in the fitness industry. But yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
So who's better with the fitness, Aussies or Kiwis?
Oh, you're going to throw me right under the bus. I can't say Kiwis, can I? I have to say Aussies. I'm going to go one for the Aussies.
All right, I'll happily take that. By the way, if anybody can hear, like, there's a lawn being mowed outside, so we might get a bit of that. Okay, so obviously a little bit about you for any of my audience who aren't as familiar with you. You've done really well on social media. You've built a big following both on Instagram and TikTok. You're an online coach. You have your own podcast. You're a WBFF pro, and it's funny. So I saw in your profile an RA pilot, and I'm thinking, as I said, I was like, oh, Royal Air Force pilot. Where the hell do you find time for that? But recreational Australian pilot. So that's actually kind of
Yes.
cool.
Yeah, it's nice to have something that's a little bit different and not just fitness about me. But yeah, like my dad's a pilot, and naturally I grew up around aviation, and I grew up in the country as well, so country Australia. So lots of opportunity to practice flying, and I started flying when I was 13 or 14, and then I was qualified when I was about 18 or 19. And I don't do it as like an occupation or anything. It's just more of a fun hobby that I want to keep the skill of, because I know when I'm a little bit older and I have a little bit more time, maybe it'd be something that I'd love to do a little bit more of.
Pops up every once in a while in the industry. I don't know if you're familiar with my friend Joel Jameson. He's been a guest on the podcast,
Mm,
an icon when it comes to conditioning energy systems. He's a
yeah.
god of it. He's a helicopter pilot amongst many other things. I just will fly around everywhere. For those listening, anybody, I'm dating myself. The band Iron Maiden are kind of funny because I mean they're old British metal. The lead singer Bruce Dickinson, he's a qualified airline pilot. I believe he has flown for British Airways before, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he at least at times has flown the band's flights around the world, right? And they've been touring for a long time. But let's get
Yeah.
to fitness questions. So you had a recent post about programming, and the post was definitely about how we talk about this all the time. Like, you can have a great program, but if you're not consistent with it, you're not going to get great results. That's a kind of a universal understanding. But it got me thinking about something else. And more, I think a lot of coaches try to distinguish themselves based on the quality of their programs. Now, I absolutely think there can be bad programs, but I also think that up to a certain point, good coaches are probably going to create great programs where you're going to have a hard time truly differentiating yourself. I think maybe I mentioned Joel Jameson, good example. He's brilliant when it comes to conditioning programs for high level, like UFC champions. Joel has coached Demetrius Johnson, one of the best ever. I think there comes a skill there for that, like Olympic level competitors, et cetera. Programming can make a difference.
Mm.
But I think for general population, I do not believe coaches are really going to be able to differentiate themselves on the quality of their programs. And I want to hear what your thoughts are on where AI and AI's ability to create programs is going to be, and what do you think really will distinguish coaches outside of their programming?
Really good question. Such a great conversation. There's sort of two parts to it, the way I see it. The first part is you're absolutely right in saying that there are bad programs, right? Like there's a bad way to sort of do things and make people do stuff. Like there's ways that are bad, absolutely. And then there's principles that good coaches always uphold: progressive overload, volume, intensity. There's just principles that people understand. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't uphold principles, as you said, like in the fitness industry, because it's so unregulated. There is a lot of rubbish out there, especially in the female industry, to be honest. Like for coaching women, it is pretty rubbish, to be honest. When you're looking at athletes and high level coaches, you're not going to see that discrepancy as much because they're following principles rather than like certain protocols, maybe that are, the best exercise X, Y, and Z. But I think most questions or most nuances come back down to niche. Like, who's your niche? Who are you speaking to? Who's this actually for? Because a good program for the wrong person for the wrong goal is still a bad program, right? So it sort of depends on like who you're speaking to and your audience, and like what their goals are. And especially with women, something that I see a lot of is just like too much volume, like not enough actual evidence-based principles in programming, like like excessive volume for glutes and no rest time. And there's just poor principles, absolutely, that most people don't follow. But then I do feel like there's the other side where people get so lost in making everything optimal that they're just not even like training hard enough. And it's like, just please don't obsess over the variables that don't really matter. Like these principles are what matter. Right? These principles are what matter. And then I think everything else is a conversation around niche. Like most things that are wrong is just for the wrong person and the wrong goal. And I think a really intelligent coach that AI will never replace is who that is. And if you can like invest just as much time in understanding programming principles as you do understanding your niche and who you work for and what they really want, like what business you're actually in providing for this person, you'll go so much further than anyone else and AI. It'll never catch up with that. So I feel like that's where it is. It's like, yes, there's bad programming, but like for who and what for? Because a bad program will be bad just depending on the person that's actually doing it.
You allude to something that I always laugh at. So there's a proliferation of what I call TikTok biomechanics
Yeah,
on
yeah.
social media. And I think there are actually some really, really smart people who've done great things in the biomechanics realm. Like that word gets thrown around a lot, right? But it's very brandable. And it's a space that if someone's savvy with video can rapidly gain status. And that's what the game is gaining status within that. Um, I and even like quote experts, very highly educated people sometimes disagree on this stuff. I'll give you a good example. Just before I came on here earlier, I saw that Brett Contreras had put up a post
I
of a
saw that. I
couple
saw
of
that.
year-old quote from Muscle Doc Jordan Shallow. Now, these are two of the smartest, most well-educated guys in like biomechanics. And I've done Prescript. I've got Brett's book. They've both been guests on the podcast before. Jordan, who's a speaker at my event last year, Jordan has a very, very strong bias against hip thrusting, largely because his understanding of biomechanics, it's training glutes in a shortened position. And he certainly does not believe that it's a particularly effective thing. I mean, I've done enough of it with female clients and guys to know that this shit works, right? And now, and Brett cited a couple studies. And again, he even to Jordan's credit, he wasn't bashing Jordan. He said, like, there's a 2-year-old quote. And in context, so I did Prescript, and Prescript, they reference a study in the textbook that was actually like basically, I don't know if it was ever retracted, but there was a white paper. Greg Nuckols had written a white paper about it. It was this Brazilian researcher. I can never remember his name, something like Barahilo or something. And it was fraudulent. It was bullshit, right? So sometimes really smart and well-intentioned people can sometimes, for lack of a better way of saying it, like almost have like a bias, and then you can grab onto research that maybe supports that bias a little bit. So knowing Jordan and how smart and intellectually honest he is has probably shifted his position. And the clip he put, Jordan's also really good at these sort of like hyperbolic sound bites, right? He's always still coming from, I think, a very solid place, but he also knows how to play the game, right? But these two guys, again, you have these two very smart, very well respected authorities on biomechanical principles who actually have diametrically opposed positions on something. So that's going to confuse the shit out of people. Now let's go back to TikTok biomechanics. I just think people are getting lost in the weeds on it, like you alluded to. And I don't know how much that stuff is really going to help. And I've actually seen people who are not credible saying blatantly false things, wrong things. And it's almost, I want to say his name, but there's another guy who's branded around glutes pretty hard. And his media is very condescending, derogatory towards women. It's sexual in a very derogatory way. He's obnoxious, and he's blown up a very big following. And I'm not resentful of someone's ability to grow following. I've done very well with it on my own. But this is the stuff that I think can lead people down the wrong path. And I think coaches get caught up in the fact that they think that this stuff matters as much as it does. So back again, any additional thoughts on where you want coaches? Because the audience is mostly coaches. What do you want them focused on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And honestly, I feel like this is where most people really go wrong in coaching. It's like, are you trying to build a following or are you trying to be a good coach? You know, and there's a difference between them, because a following doesn't necessarily mean that you got a good business either. I know a lot of really like influential people that really struggle in business. The same way that I know a lot of really intelligent coaches that struggle to retain their clients because they can't speak their language, and they make them feel dumb rather than like empowered with knowledge. So a lot of this is like, who's your audience and who are you speaking to, and what's your ultimate goal? The problem I have with a lot of some of this information, I ask myself, is this helpful? Like, is this helpful for people to hear? And what's the real problem that this information is actually fixing? And using the hip thrust, for example, I think that when research comes out and you're like, oh, the hip thrust is effective, like, is it a surprise? No. Like, it's always in hindsight, right? Like, research is research of what's known, and bodybuilders have been doing this for years and years, right? It's like, we've known this has worked, we've known this, it's why we do it. And also the opposite as well. Like, a lot of things have been disproven in that way, but it's important to like make sure that you're focusing on the right things as a coach and what's actually important. And I would argue a lot of people in the coaching business, unless you're working with high level athletes, one of your biggest jobs is to help people enjoy exercise, enjoy training, and be compliant, because you can write the best program with all the high level principles in the world, but if they're not following it and they're not enjoying it and they're not seeing results, then you're not going to retain them as a client for the duration that's required to actually get physical change. So I think a lot of people get lost. And I also see these, what did you coin it? Like TikTok biomechanic people. A lot of them don't work with humans. You know what I mean? And this is where they go wrong, is it's like, tell me how this is helpful. Like, tell me how this is applicable. And it just gets so lost. So like, I think for coaches, like, just be mindful of like the stuff you love learning about, the stuff you love consuming, all that stuff you love, that your clients are probably 5 years behind you. And you need to make sure that you're speaking the lingo and you're actually programming for that person, not for you. Don't give them all the bells and whistles. They don't care. They really don't care. Like, no one cares unless they like you, first and foremost. So don't be a dick online. I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is like, focus on what really matters. Get that buy-in from the client, get that trust. Like, don't tell your female clients that hip thrusts are rubbish. Oh, I just don't know how it's going to land, especially if they've been doing them. So I think there's nuance to both, but I think there's a middle ground. One of the reasons why I've done Prescript too, and love Jordan. He's a very intelligent man. I love the way his brain thinks. I try to keep up, but I can't. He talks so fast. And then Brett on the flip, love Brett. He's great. I'm actually in his glute book, I think. And the thing I love about Brett is that he works hands-on with people and he's always open. Yes, I'm in there. I'm in there.
All right,
Don't
I'm
tell me
listening,
what
but I'm
page.
actually looking to see if I can
Find
find
me. It's a comparison photo.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing I like about Brett is like, he's obviously got the glute lab. He works hands-on with women. And the thing as well is like, he knows what his audience and his niche likes. He knows the way they like programming. He knows what keeps them motivated. He's not scared to trial new things and actually go, yeah, this feels good, but and actually use like his experience rather than just always leaning on a textbook or a research paper. Because I think we can get too lost in that. And things can be disproven. And like you said, sometimes research can be wrong as well, in the wrong context in particular. So I think it's such a nuanced space, especially in the coaching industry.
There you are.
Where am I?
Nobody can
There I
see this,
am.
but it's actually right at the beginning. There's a ton of before and after photos. There you are. That's actually hysterical. I wouldn't have known. Yep. Cool.
That's pretty old. I think that's probably like, I don't even know, 3-4 years ago at least.
Oh, this book is,
longer.
There's a good subtle piece of context it's a bit technical, but it will actually be a really good illustration of the principles here. Like, talk about the hip thrust. You also have to consider the situation, the environment. So I, for example, bought a glute drive for my basement gym, and there's a glute
Mm.
drive at the gym, and I also contract out. I split my time. And yeah, for years, the old gym I used to work at, I was the one reading T Nation. I'm the one who brought farmers carries in. None of the other coaches were even thinking about this. Then they started copying me. I'm the one who starts doing hip thrusts in this gym. And so the other trainers in that environment who are not studying this stuff, but they do, they monkey see, monkey do. Like, oh, that looks cool. I
Mhm.
would do that with my clients. This is long before everybody is on video-based media showing this stuff off, right? You can see now in gyms, younger people doing smarter, more evidence-based things, whether it's trendy, popular stuff from quote influencers or credible strength and conditioning coaches who have figured out media and like a built followings. It's proliferating into the everyday. Like the Gen Pop is soaking this stuff up through social
Yeah.
media, which is great. But when you really get down to it, how much of a fucking pain in the ass is it to set up a hip thrust? You have to get the right bench. You have to find space for it. You have to bring your own pad, all this. And quite frankly, for the woman who has 45 minutes to come into a gym on a lunch break to do a workout, it may actually not be the best choice for her circumstance. Whereas if you can hop in the glute drive, slap plates on and go, like way less hassle, like just way less hassle. So I actually really like, and I think that the trade-off in terms of the benefit of a glute drive versus like the effort put into it is very positive. I like it.
Mhm.
You can turn it around pretty quickly. And also I find that most of the people, like guys, not so much. Women on average love it. On average,
Mhm.
right? I
Yeah.
don't like generalizing, but on average they like it.
Yeah, I feel like as well, I'm completely the same as well. Like I hate setting a barbell. I probably won't. I'll do a kickback or something instead. But I almost always use a machine for a hip thrust. And I think the one thing I do love about a hip thrust, anyways, for a lot of women, is it's one of the first exercises that I feel like they build a lot of strength and confidence on. Because putting a really heavy barbell on your back, or even like a deadlift, if form's not quite there, or upper body as well, it's sometimes can be demoralizing of how much you can shoulder press versus anything else. But a hip thrust, like you can really, they hit the 100-kilo club, they feel strong, that starts to ripple into other areas. They go, maybe I can start to deadlift like heavier as well. And it builds that intensity. And that's great. Do you know what I mean? It's that stepping stone for a lot of people. But what you're mentioning too, and it's exactly why I've sort of changed my sort of programming around hip thrusts and things as well, is because I got so strong on it that I'm like, okay, I've got 5 plates on each side. Like, really, how much more? This is a pain in the ass. Like, it's taken me an hour. I need to like mechanically disadvantage myself so that I can still keep progressing, because I'm just building the skill of getting strong on a hip thrust. And is that my goal? Not really. So yeah, I think it all just, like I said, the right advice to the wrong person is still the wrong advice. And I think everyone has seasons and changes what works for them based on like what they're trying to achieve as well.
So dance arounds video-based media a lot in that. So I wanted to go there and ask, you know, obviously you see great potential, you've embraced it, you've done very well, you've grown in it. Could you talk a little bit about how you approach that? Was it something that you found you're very natural on video, or did you have a lot of work to learn both comfort behind the camera, the video editing stuff, anything about it that your experience and for other coaches, whether or not they should lean into it?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I started on social media when I was working as a nurse and a midwife. I was doing that for probably nearly a decade. I was in a completely different industry and I was competing alongside my work as a nurse. So I was doing that and I felt like I had these like 2 parallel lives. So I actually built a good chunk of my following through competing, but then also it was almost, at the time, it was a little bit weird that I was a full-time nurse, but I was a bikini pro. Everyone was like, that's a bit like, and I was like, it's just a hobby. It's just fun. It's just a passion. I never wanted to make money out of it. I never wanted to turn it into a business or anything like that. And then I think COVID forced a lot of us to sort of pivot and change directions as well. And that's sort of when I went more into the coaching realm and started to take things a little bit more seriously, I'd say. And I still see my platform as like just sharing what I'm doing, but I probably educate with a little bit more purpose and intentionality rather than it being like such a personal brand or personal vibe. But I'm biased because I've built almost everything off organic social media that I have. So it's been the platform for me that's done it. But I know that there's a lot of people that didn't have that pathway, or maybe didn't have that platform and opportunity as well. And they went through different means of traditional business, perhaps. But I think in the fitness industry, we can't hide that it's very much a visual, industry as well. And I think coaches, especially founders, you have a responsibility to articulate to the world what you do and how you do it, because you're the voice for your brand. So whether you're building like a personal brand and you're, Sharelle Grant Fitness, or you're building another brand, like my business is the Women's Health Movement, it's your responsibility to showcase that and communicate that, because no one will do it better than you as the founder or as the owner. So I think there's a responsibility to do it. How you do it is dependent on you and your personality. Like I'm fine on camera. I like talking. I'm happy to do that as a skill. I would rather do that than sit down and write a really long blog post or do that. However, there's some people that should write a really long blog post, and that's their preference. That's what they're good at. So I think marketing is essential. It's a core pillar of business. You have to do it. And I think that, Instagram or social media, it's just the internet these days. Like, who goes on Google and types in online coach in Australia? No one. They go on Instagram and they search locations, or they see a trending video that you've made. So I think it's really important these days more than ever. And I think it's only going to become more important. And I think it's what separates people, because not only does it show that you've got, I guess, influence, but it shows that people like you. Right. And people go to coaches, like they buy coaches, not coaching. And I think it's important for coaches to understand that you do need to show a little bit about you, your personality, why people should come to you, especially in such a saturated industry, right? It's only going to get worse. And if you can build a reputation, I think it's only going to be beneficial. It gives you opportunity, right? Like what Gary Vee says, it's like attention is everything, to be honest.
I can already tell, like, have you read his new book, Day Trading Attention? Because you're
Yeah.
saying, I was guessing that because I was going to reference it. I just went through it. It just came out. I think everybody should, like, who is interested in what we're talking about, go through that book. There's a lot of big takeaways there. He's got some tactical stuff, but one of the big things, and I'll let you guys dive into the book. The algorithms are changing. TikTok has changed social media algorithms. TikTok was the first one to really push interest-based algorithm versus seeing what's showing up from who you follow. So we've noticed more and more Instagram starting to do it. Twitter's been doing it for a while. Facebook is doing it a lot more. I've noticed a lot more. The type of stuff you interact with, but you don't follow, it feeds you more of that. So what it's changed is the companies understand that you may be following certain things, but what you're interacting with will show what you're interested in. It's going to show you more of what you're interested in because it knows you better than you know yourself. So this is going to be the reality. And what I've seen is there are a certain type of coach, and they're not bad people, but they've been around a while and they've always sort of crafted narratives, negative narratives around social media. So instead of embracing it, or they're kind of like the person who says, all right, for New Year's, I'm going to go on a diet and I'm going to work out 6 times a week. And the person leaps into something that even subconsciously, they fucking know that they're never going to do it for a length of time. But what they've done is they've made a token effort that is unsustainable and effectively impossible in that context. Then they quit it. And then what they've done is they've soothed the discomfort that's built up about how they feel, how they look, etc., whatever their confidence. And they've crafted a situation and a story to say, hey, see, I can't. I'm not the kind of person who can do this. So it becomes a self-fulfilling narrative. It becomes a self-protective narrative, and it becomes a narrative that keeps someone in place. And I see this all of the time. New Year's is just the perfect thing for it. But if you go into coaches, there are a lot of coaches who would rather denigrate, complain about, and whine about, quote, influencers, whine about it. And very negative narratives on their social media. I saw a post recently. I'm not interested in naming names. And I looked in there, there's like a whole bunch of people shared it. There's a whole bunch of other coaches. Yeah. Like, it's like, I look at this and I'm like, holy shit, guys. You would rather sit in a little echo chamber of complaint instead of direct that energy into learning some of these skills that will help you. And you would rather craft this narrative, no, these people are bad, this is wrong, than to actually figure out how to use it for you, because it's not going back to the way it was. No amount of regulation, no legislation will ever take the grifters and the bad guys, because we know there are bad people. We know that there are people who are walking through grocery store aisles yelling at breakfast cereal, right? You imagine the parent who's doing the best they fucking can, and they buy Lucky Charms for the kids. And guess what? Lucky Charms are really fucking good. I enjoy them, okay? And some idiot is in a grocery aisle, like shaming parents for feeding their kids Lucky Charms. Fuck right off with that shit, because that's not helping anybody. But it's a good way to build status and get a lot of clicks with fear-based stuff. Sure, those people exist. That's part of social media. So guess what? Do it better. Do it with ethics and integrity, and don't understand the game without doing the dirty stuff that we think is unethical. And it's too easy for some people in the industry to look at the bad guys and throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, all this is bad, all social media is bad. And you can sit there and you can watch. And I've watched some of these individuals and their star is fading. And that's a little harsh, but they're complaining because their star is fading because they're not getting the invites to speak at conferences anymore. They're not getting, invited on the same podcast or what have you. And they haven't embraced like deeper relationships within the industry to support other people. Instead, it's no, I'd rather sit in my echo chamber with the like-minded coaches who just want to cry and whine and say, this is bad, make it go away. It's not going away.
Unfortunately, as well, like it comes from insecurity, and it's just like you said, it's actually jealousy, the way I see it, because I get a little bit of that. I get the old hate comments come my way, and it's like, I know that you're just angry, that like in the nicest way. It's sort of like there's really intelligent people that live in textbooks and live behind their degrees, that never wanted to make a TikTok, or like they're like, I don't want to dance in front of a camera, it's for kids. And it's like, nah, radio, like it's not. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit of ignorance, but then it's also like a little bit of jealousy that they can't see through, that they're like, okay, I can see that something's here and I'm actually missing out on opportunity for me. That I have a lot of opportunity here. If I just let my ego down and ask for a little bit of help and actually get some direction, because I believe if most people are positively reinforced at the start early and strongly enough, they'll keep doing it. But it's when they do a post, doesn't perform, they ask for something, they don't get it, maybe they get rejected and they go back and they go, this is shit. But they're just doing it from a place of like insecurity, rather than if they actually got reinforced at all of those opportunities. But that's the game of social media. That's not how it works, right? You've got to earn it, and you've got to actually build skills so that you can gain momentum in that way.
Not unlike the person who goes to the gym who needs the positive reinforcement. That's where a coach is very valuable. But the person who doesn't see the changes in the mirror right away because they've been eating salad all week and the scale didn't go down and they don't see changes, they get discouraged and they go, well, what's the point of this? I'm just going to go back to the old way. But they forgot that they weren't in a stasis. They were actually in gradual decline and feeling worse and worse and gaining more body fat over time. And that's a whole different topic. But I think your and my philosophies towards this stuff are aligned very, very closely. Okay, so another thing I want to ask you about, because like as I was digging through your media and I was trying to like figure out, okay, what are some good questions and some things that would tap into how you've been successful. And obviously you have an app. And I find this sort of fascinating because I think a lot of coaches probably think, well, I need an app. So the first part of a multi-pronged set of questions, any old school listeners will know I could like throw 3 or 4 big complicated questions all at once, but you'll tease out the stuff. So one, do coaches need apps? 2, what was the experience like developing it, cost, infrastructure, et cetera? How valuable has it been, and what has it allowed you to do in terms of delivery and scale with your business?
Yeah, good question. My philosophy, like with business, is I always try and fix problems. So like I've never, because I came from such a different industry and a different way of thinking, and I'm not, I'm not so much financially driven. I love lifestyle. I love being able to live through my passion. I love having freedom of time. I love all those things. That's always what drives a lot of what I want to do. But I always try and fix problems. And at the start of my journey, when I was getting into coaching, I was like, I'll take on 5 clients, and I took on 5 clients, and then I just got inundated. It was sort of during COVID. So I sort of got a little bit of a wave, I guess, what wasn't normal time, which I had no idea. I had like 600 people on my coaching waitlist. And I was like, that's normal, right? And I remember my good friend Eugene, who I was training with at the time, he's like, no, you need to do something more with this. Like, you should just let them, like, if you can only have X amount of clients, like you should probably consider something else. So at the time, I was still nursing and I just wanted a handful of clients because I was sort of working part-time doing this, not really sure what I was doing. Is like, ew, what do I do? You've got to pick a path. And then at the time I was getting a lot of people ask me for training programs. And I'd naturally, as I said, I'd naturally share my training, what I was doing. I was competing at the time as well. And I was moving into like wellness. So I was training in a little bit of more of a, I guess, like traditional wellness now way of like more lower body focus, etc. Eugene was doing my program at the time with me too. And I was just naturally sharing a lot of it. So then naturally I had a lot of people ask me, oh, can you write me a program or can I join in or whatever? So it just sparked the prompt and it made me create something called Train with Sharelle at the time. So I pretty much was like, oh, okay, well, instead of, I don't want to promote this like train like me or, I wanted to make this running subscription to a training program. And at the time, this is quite a few years ago now, subscriptions to training programs weren't a thing. It was like buy my 12-week program and then off you go. But I was like, well, that doesn't work. I need them to progressively overload. I need to program it in. We need to go through conditioning, strength, hypertrophy. Like we need to go through seasons, right, in training. So I was like, that's not going to work. I need to make it like more of a running subscription in what I do. So I actually used my coaching platform, which was True Coach at the time. You probably heard of it.
I used to write for them. I still use it.
Yeah, there you go. So I used True Coach at the time. And we set it all up. I had a friend who was like right into sort of tech stuff. He helped me integrate everything, and my partner was also helping alongside. And he was like, "I'll do some of the management side of it." So I was like, "Great, we'll do this little thing. That'll be awesome. I'll put an email out." And then it just really took off. Like I got a lot of people on my Train with Sharelle subscription, and it was all run manually. Like everyone that come in, my partner had to add them on. So it got to the point where he was just doing like hours a day of just admin. And I was like, what have we done? What have we created? So we ended up creating this bigger problem. And I was like, now we need to fix this problem. Like we can't have this sort of built on top of like just True Coach. We need this to be more automated. And as I mentioned, this is a couple of years ago, and tech's changed so much. Apps have changed so much in the meantime, where I know that there's apps now where you could probably do something similar without the logistical stuff. But back then it was Trainerize and True Coach. There was really not many other means of programming for people. So I started to develop an app, and I was like, I just want to develop an app. I want to brand it with the women's health movement because I knew I was going to be rebranding my coaching. And now I've got a team of coaches that work alongside me, and we have, like they take the majority of the client load. And then we have the app too. So I always had this vision to make an ecosystem of what I do rather than just coaching, or I didn't want to just do a training subscription, but I wanted to create an affordable option for people that couldn't come into the coaching and make sure I could give an intelligent style of training and programming that's not built off just like train like me, look like me, that actually has, as I said, the principles that align with me, different training cycles. It's got an educational hub. And it's also centered a lot more around women's health. It's got mindset. It's got lots of other things inside it too. And there's not a lot of options for women out there. Even this early day and age, there's still not. So to answer your question, no, an app is not necessary for coaches. In fact, I would tell people not to do it. I was fortunate that I'd done all of that to the point where I had the Train with Sharelle funded the development of the app, essentially. Like I used the funds from that to build this and create something that gave me more time freedom back, gave my partner a life back, and was just able to then focus my time in the actual working with people and then build the product alongside it. So that's sort of why I ended up doing it. For new coaches out there, it's absolutely not necessary. There's like, do your craft, get really good at coaching, understand what the problems are that you're solving, and fix problems. Don't create products without proof of concept. It's a disaster. And I know heaps of people that have wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars on apps that never made it to market because they didn't test the product, they didn't test the concept, and they didn't have the audience there that wanted it. So yeah, I don't know if that gives you the context, but that's sort of, yeah.
That's a brilliant answer, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. So we're talking about delivering one-to-many coaching, which is something that I do now do as a piece of a puzzle. Like 2.5 years ago, me and a former client mentee of mine. Her name is Bailey Lau. So we had an entire other podcast. We have like 70 odd episodes with, and some listeners may have heard some of this stuff. So Bailey was a client of mine who was seeking a mentor at a trainer, and she herself is a coach. So she came over, actually moved her business over to the gym that I contract out of. It was way better for her. And then just I had this idea is like, well, I see these other people doing this, like these one-to-many like group programs. So like, what do you think? So she loved the idea. We dove into it, built this out, and so we did it, and I still do it. She decided to branch out on her own. She's going through Jonathan Goodman's mentorship. She's excelled. She travels a conference. She's doing great, and she's earned that right. So I had a decision of, well, shit, do I just shut this down? Do I do the, oh, I'm the guy with the women's like training program thing? I actually just wrote an article for Muscle and Fitness that went into all of this stuff. And there are guys out there who are really popular with women as far as coaches. There's like, you get your Jordan Syatt's or Tony Jellicore's, I reference them in the article. They don't train women exclusively, but they are very popular with women. So it really is okay. There are also some really problematic individuals in the industry who brand around women as well. And we've seen this sort of thing too. So not interested in saying names, but ultimately I decided to keep the program going because the support from my community was so strong that they just love it. The idea of shutting it down. And you said this, it's an affordable option. It can provide structure and support when they need it surgically. So that way we're not doing everything for the same shit we would do for a one-on-one clients, which obviously is going to have a higher price point. But a lot of people don't need that. So they'll self-select to something that they can function independently, but when they need you to like check out my form on this video or whatever, then you can actually take your time surgically and actually give them that high touch service. I've had women in my program tell me that in a group setting in the Facebook group where I'm responding to questions or like coaching them, that I'm more responsive than coaches they paid a lot of money for one-on-one, supposedly high-end coaching. And when I'm hearing that, I'm like, okay, I'm onto something here. And I'm able to direct my, because you alluded to, it's like, how can we effectively use our time? But I believe there is incredible potential for coaches if you create a one-to-many platform. But you also said something else that's key. You have to have the audience. And if you think about this, like my last intake was 78 women, which I think is pretty good. Like I'm really happy with it. I've really unlocked a few things now that I think over the next couple of years I can really grow it. But 78 women in this particular 13-week cohort, and I roll them. So I still do the rolling through the programs and those intakes as opposed to the subscription model. And I think there's benefits to both. I think subscription is great because I know Jordan Syatt and Susan Niebergall, they do that with their inner circle. It's very much a subscription-based thing, and they've crushed it. It was one of the blueprints because I had a call with Susan asking her questions when we originally set this up, right? So it was one of the inspirations. And you're right, you need the ability to scale it. But if you think about it, I have a following. Now it's 63% women, which is sort of a weird phenomenon. It happened by accident. And I'm currently at about 163,000 followers. And I had 78 women in this. So you think about that ratio, right? And there's more and more people getting into the space and doing online coaching, group-based stuff all the time who are succeeding in video-based media. So it can feel saturated. So it may be challenging for most coaches who have, the 3,000 or 500 people that they know socially to turn around and effectively build a really good, lucrative one-to-many group-based platform. And based on what you said, like to throw $100,000 plus into an app without that, no way. And I use Jonathan Goodman's Quick Coach right now to deliver, because we did PDFs originally, and I still do. I send it all out in PDF, Facebook group. But, and the Quick Coach works as a web-based app effectively, right? And so that has actually been really popular with the community. They like it. I'm also going to consider the possibility of looking at Train Heroic. So Train Heroic does one-to-many very well. My friend Luca Hocevar does his stuff through Train Heroic, and he says it is an incredible platform for this too. So I think that would be a good place for coaches to at least start versus going, hey, I need to develop an app.
100%. And like I said, we ran everything through True Coach until it was a full-time job to add people on. And I feel like a lot of people, you have to burn a little bit before you just go, I'm going to take a stab in the dark. Like you don't have to anymore. You have technology, you have all these platforms that you can test things on. And I also, there's a really good, someone, I can't remember who told me this, but essentially you'll sell to about 1% of your audience. at best, 1%. So let's say, you know, you've got 100,000 people, you're only going to sell to like 1% of that audience. So like if you've got, and it's not always this way because I know algorithms change and everything, but if you've only got 5,000 followers, like don't make like a low ticket offer for the masses and put so much time and energy into it because you're only going to sell to 1% of that. And there's people, like I said, that have 1 million followers that don't have a good business because they can't sell, they don't have the team, they don't have the structure, and they're not willing to do the time, and they're good at doing hooks in content, you know, and that's fine. But that's the difference from an influencer to a coach, in my opinion, and someone that's actually building a coaching business. It is so different. And like my job is not Instagram. Like I don't make money like from Instagram. I make money from the conversion from Instagram into business. And then that's when the real work starts, because you don't have a business if you don't have retention or a good product. So I think most coaches need to think of themselves as like, yes, you wear a lot of hats, but you're a business person as well as you are a marketer. And there's just different medias and platforms and ways in which you do it. But for most people, honestly, don't get into the tech space at the moment. Stick to your craft and make a really good product and build an audience, build an email list, whatever it is that you're doing to try and build reputation and audience. It gives you opportunity and it gives you levers for when you need to do it, so that when opportunity arises, like COVID, to be honest, that was an opportunity in the online space. You've got the levers to pull and execute on, because those things don't come around. Obviously, we don't want that one to come around again, but there's different seasons and stages that you can execute and it'll be obvious. That's something I like to think of, is like the decision should be quite obvious. It's like, this feels so right, whether it's a feeling or like people are asking you for it, whatever it is, like you should be like fixing problems rather than just trying to like have a stab at the dark and see if you can hit.
I think everything here is brilliant. I hope every coach listening is kind of going, yeah, there's like so much. It's obvious that you've done it, right? And like you said, there are people who are posting stuff and you can tell they never coach anybody. But you can also tell when someone's talking about business, it's like, I'm not so sure you've actually ever had any success in this, because I don't think that makes sense. I just agree with everything you've said here, and I think it's really smart. I think you've forged a path that's worked really well for you, and you've even acknowledged the fact that not everybody should probably do it, or probably could do it the way you did it. But I think the fundamentals are really, really sound, just like you started with the principles of strength and conditioning, right? The principles are tried and true. The tactics may vary by situation. Where can people find you to follow you and to see more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm on most platforms. You can just find me under my handle, which is just Sharelle Grant. There's no other Sharelle Grants, I don't think. So you can just find me. Mostly active on, I would say, Instagram is probably my most active platform. And then I also have a podcast myself called the Level Up Podcast, with my co-host Danny as well. And yeah, we do weekly episodes over there as well. And we've been running for a few years ourselves. So yeah, you can find us over if podcast are your thing as well.
Right. I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you. Your early morning, my evening. And I've been trying to remind people of this one. I would like to reach more people. If you're the person who listens to the end of these kind of podcasts, which tells me you're all in, I'm going to call up my buddy Blake here. He's over in Hawaii. Blake knows. Blake listens to these. Brian Dowie, he's over in Hong Kong. He listens to all these. You guys are amazing. Love you guys. And share this with someone else. If this has had a really incredible impact on your career, share my episodes with someone else. If you really find Sharelle's story and what her media represents really inspiring, go check her out, go follow her, but also then share this episode specifically so other people can find her and follow her. Okay. Thank you guys. I really appreciate you all. Sharelle, thanks for taking the time. And if scheduling works out well, I'll be back very soon with another episode.